Well, hello there, darlings. Today we will make a lovely apple chutney. Excellent for cheese, for dips, as a little side for a curry, for example. And so these are the ingredients that you shall need. You will need 1 kilograms of apples, 2 onions, 400 grams of sugar, 400 milliliters of vinegar, then either 1 large bay leaf or in this case 2 small bay leaves. Then you'll need a chunk of ginger. I'm using 1 chili, although you can also just leave it out if you don't like your chutneys to be too spicy. Then you will need 2 teaspoons of mustard seeds, or if you don't have any mustard seeds, you can use mustard powder, but then instead of 2 teaspoons, use just 1 teaspoon of mustard powder, as that is much stronger. And then we will need 1 teaspoon of salt. Additionally to that, we will need 1 large pot in which we're going to make our chutney. We'll need a cutting board, a decent knife, a small knife, a spoon, and a peeler. And because I'm making a rather large amount, I will be preserving it as well. So I have 6 jars with their lids. I do not think I will need all 6 of them, but I'll just prep all 6 of them anyway. By prepping, I simply mean I wash them with plenty of soap, rinse them out, and have them ready on the tray. The tray we will also need later on for the sealing of these jars. So first things first, we're going to prep everything. So I'm going to prep the apples last, simply because they like to oxidize, meaning they're gonna get brown quite quickly. So I wanna do those last. So first thing here, I'm doing the onions. Nothing too exciting. Peel it and then dice it nicely. Now the trick with not crying when you cut an onion, there are several different tricks that people have done, and some tricks work better for some people, for others work other tricks better. Now, something that is for sure is that you have to make sure your knife is very, very sharp. Because if it isn't sharp, what happens is it actually, rather than cut, it actually sort of rips through the fiber of the onion, which then releases much more of its juice. And it is the juice that then creates the gas, or rather, with the juice also this gas gets released, and that is what makes you actually cry. And also practice. I mean, I've cut so many onions in my life. Nonetheless, even I will cry sometimes cutting the onions, even if I have a very sharp knife. So, you know. So the way I'm slicing the onion, as you saw, I cut it once in half. And I make sure that I keep this part of it, which is the end part of the onion, because that keeps it all together. And then what I do is I just do a couple of slices horizontally. Well, 2 and 3, evenly spaced apart. Then I cut it down, but not all the way through. Not all the way through, but only like this, so that it still is all attached to the onion. So I've cut it all, everything, but it's all still together. It stays all together because it's all still connected here. Because I have neither when I cut it this way did I cut it all the way through, and neither when I cut it from the top down I cut it all the way through. So it's all being held together by this little bit here. And this way you can just slice them down, and then you've got lovely little dices of onions. And then when I get to the very end of it, I just put it on its side, and then I cut through it both ways, so that I use the whole onion basically. Lovely. Next things we're going to do is the ginger. Now the skin of the ginger is so thin that it actually can be peeled with a spoon. It's quite simple. Let me show you how. So you take your spoon and you take the scoopy side, I suppose, and then you just scrape it off the ginger. And as you can see, the skin is really, really thin, and it's only the skin that comes off. There's no flesh that comes off with it. You can just peel like that. It's very, very simple. Because I've seen people use knives, I've seen people use a peeler that you would use for potatoes or for apples, and it just takes away way too much of the flesh. Completely unnecessary. And with the spoon, it works very easy. It just scrapes off this very thin skin. Excellent. So now you've got your ginger, and we want to slice it. We want to dice it up so it's about the same size of the onions. The same thing afterwards with the chili. We want it all to be about the same size. So in this case, for this size, I will just cut it in thin strips. But first I'm going to cut it in on the sides like this. So you've got discs like that, and then you just cut it down one side and then down the other side, and then you've got nice little dices that match the onions quite nicely. Lovely. Excellent. Now we're gonna take our chili. As I mentioned, if you don't like it quite so spicy, just don't take the chili, or maybe you only use half of the chili. I do like a little bit of spice in it, not too much. And so we're going to cut it quite simply. We're going to take off the top. Then we'll slice it in half. And then inside we have the seeds and this white bit that holds the seeds together. We're going to cut that out. So we're going to cut the white bit, and the seeds are going to go out. The white bit has, as well as the seeds, have unnecessary has a very bittery taste that you just don't want to have. You want to avoid that. The same thing, by the way, with bell peppers. If you have bell peppers and you want to prep them, make sure you remove the seeds and also the white bit inside, because that is just bitter and it's just unnecessary. Alright, so now we have them in half, and I actually quite like the length of it. At first I wanted to dice them down to the same size of the onions, but I think they will look quite nice if we leave them in strips. So we're just gonna cut it down in thin strips. Now there's a funny little story, I have to say. The very first time that I cut chilies, I was working in England and we were making a curry. And we always made the same curry, once mild and once very spicy. And with this very spicy one, I had to cut up one kilograms of these chilies. So, of course, I put on some gloves because of the spice of it. And after I was done with it, I just took off my gloves, threw them away, and I went to the loo. Let's not make it too graphic, but let's just say after I had gone out of the loo, I had a very intense and unpleasant burning sensation for a good 20 minutes. So even though I was wearing gloves, because I was working with for such a long time, it just went right through the gloves and it stayed on my hand. So it's very important, after you cut up your chili, before you do anything else, really, you should wash your hands thoroughly with soap, as well as your knife and your cutting board. Alright, and now we're going to do the apples. So first, of course, we're going to peel the apples after we've washed them, naturally. And something that always is quite fun to do is to make sure that when you peel the apple, you always keep the whole thing in one beautiful strip. Simply because that's an amusing little game to play as you do this rather tedious work of peeling. Oh, never mind. Let me know if you managed. Alright, so now we're going to cut them up. So now we still have the middle, of course, that we need to remove. Now you could use an apple corer, but I just find this way much more efficient. I just cut it in half, again in half, and then I just, here you have this piece, and then I'll just cut it in like this, and then get rid of it like that. I find that much more efficient. So after you've done that, you take one of these quarters, cut them in half, like that, and then you slice them down a bit. So cut them down 7 times, more or less. So you've got small pieces. You don't want them too large, because it is, after all, a chutney. But don't worry, they will lose a little bit of their size once, when they're cooking. This part you want to do, of course, as quick as possible, so they do not oxidize. Or rather, so that they oxidize as little as possible. What we will do after we've cut them, actually, we'll add a little bit of lemon juice to them. Because that will help them with not oxidizing. If you don't have lemon juice, that's not a problem. We can just take a little bit of vinegar. So as I suspected, I don't actually have any lemon juice. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the vinegar and mix it. And I haven't cut all the apples yet, but we might as well put it in on there now. There's no harm done by that. And then we just, every time we add an apple, we just give it a little bit mix. So they all get a little bit of that lovely vinegar. Don't forget to keep your station nice, clean and tidy. Alright, so now I've got my pot here. I've added the sugar to it, a dash of water, and what we're doing, we're just gonna let it melt a little bit, so we've got a very thick syrup. It doesn't have to caramelize. If you know how to caramelize, you can also do that if you want. That gives a little extra flavor to it. But it's no need to caramelize it. And then once the sugar has melted completely with the water, again, it's just a dash of water. And we've got a nice thick syrup. Not sure if you can see it. It's just a thick syrup. Nothing too exciting. Alright, alright. Then we're gonna add our onions with the ginger and the chili to it. Marvelous. Lovely. And we're just gonna stew it for a couple of minutes. At this point, we can actually add our spices. So we've got, in this case, I've got 2 small bay leaves, or if you have 1 large one, that also works. And then we've got our mustard seeds, or if you don't have mustard seeds, use mustard powder. Just use half the amount if you use mustard powder. And our salt. Alright, that's already long enough. It's been a couple of minutes. And now we're gonna add our lovely apples. You can put up the temperature quite high. I have it now at about 160 degrees Celsius. You just have to watch out because sugar, it will start caramelizing at about 143 Celsius. So I have it now at 160, so it's quite high. But if you are standing next to it and you're stirring it, then nothing much can happen really. Alright, now I have it all in there. Now naturally, apples have a lot of water. So once you've added the apples to it, and you wait a few minutes, let it stew in there, you will find that there's quite a bit of water that will come out of it, of course. Now the reason why I'm not adding a lid on here to maybe make it cook a little faster is because we actually want the moisture to escape. We want the water that's in the apple to go out. We won't get rid of all of it because we do want a little bit of water in there. That's alright, but we don't want all of the water that's inside the apples and the onions. Okay, so at this point, so we've been cooking it now, or rather we've been stewing it now for about 5 minutes. There's quite a bit of water that has come out now of the apples. So they've already cooked a little bit. So we're gonna add the vinegar now to it. And now I'm gonna put up the temperature a little bit because I want it to start boiling. And once it has started to boil and has reached that temperature, we will then put down the temperature a little bit so that it just simmers rather than boils. Okay, so it's just started to boil now. Make sure you don't put your head right above it because they can be quite nasty because of all the vinegar. Good, so it started to boil, so let me put down the temperature. So it's just on a nice little simmer. Make sure always when you cook in a pot that you scrape down the sides of your pot, the inside, because you will have ingredients there like the onions, the chili, the mustard and whatnot. And you want to make sure it's all inside and all the flavor can be used rather than it being wasted on the side of the pot. Alright, so now we're going to let it simmer for about 25 minutes. So it's been 25 minutes now and it's looking very nice. The consistency is exactly how we want it. We want it to be quite thick, the viscosity. Let me see if I can show you a little bit of how it looks now. And let me get to the camera. Hello there, darlings. So let me show you how it looks now. As you can see, it's quite thick. The consistency is precisely what we want. The apples mostly still have their shape, so that's excellent. So at this point, we just need to try. We need to make sure there's enough salt in there. And yeah, so let's do that. Alright, so now we just need to try it. Part of me kind of wants it to taste awful just because it would be kind of funny. Yeah, very good. Yeah, lovely. You can taste the sugar, it's sweet. You've got the acidity, the vinegar, and you've got a little bit on the back of your throat, a little bit of heat, a bit of spice from the chili, but it's very subtle. It's not a lot. So if you don't mind, if you don't mind it to be a little spicy, mild, then I think you might actually like adding a whole chili or maybe half a chili. It gives a nice little spicy edge to it. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I'm making a large amount, of course, because I'm lazy. Rather than making this 5 times, I'm making it once, and then I can fill it up and I can preserve it for in the future. And when you preserve it properly, you can keep it actually for years without a problem. So now I had prepared 6 jars and the lid. I don't think we will need all 6. I'm gonna guess maybe 4, maybe 5. In any case, I have prepped that already. And what is important, you need to have your oven on. And the oven is on now at 140 degrees Celsius. Alright, let's fill those jars up. You know, I always like to do a larger amount, as I said, so that I don't have to do it later on. So I always have a nice stock. And also, it's very nice to give these as presents. When you go and visit a friend, when you visit family, as a sort of present that you take with you. It's a very Swiss thing to do as well. It's not only in Switzerland, there are other countries in which we do this. But whenever we're invited to someone's home, it's very usual to bring some chocolate, to bring a bottle of wine, to bring maybe some salty snacks, some peanuts and things like that. And of course, it would be very nice if you can bring some homemade something. In this case, a nice jar of pickle. Alright, so I ended up actually having 4 jars. I thought so. Alright, so we're gonna close it off nice and tight. Alright, so I ended up having 4 jars. So we're gonna just close them off. Again, make sure you washed these jars and lids properly beforehand. Put them on top. Excellent. And now we have this pan. And what we're gonna do is I have here a kettle where I boiled some water. So we're gonna add the water in here. Just so that it is a little bit underwater. It's about the thickness of a finger. And now like this, with the boiling water in here, we're gonna put it in the oven. Again, the oven is 140 degrees Celsius, and we will leave it in there for another 20 minutes. Alright, it's in the oven now, and again, we're gonna leave it 20 minutes. Now, in case you're wondering, why did I add water at the bottom of it? First of all, I heated up the water, so the whole procedure goes a bit faster, of course. And the reason why you add water is because if you don't add any water, you have direct heat from the oven, and that can cause the glass to break. And that is why I have water in there, because water really can't get much hotter than boiling point, which is perfectly fine for the glass. So that's why I add a little bit of water in there, and then I leave it in there for 20 minutes. And the whole idea is to get the material, the liquid, the chutney, the pickle, whatever it is that you have in there that you are preserving, to have it boil a little bit. It releases some steam. The steam goes out of the jar. It can go out, but no fresh air can go in, and then you are basically causing a vacuum, and that way you can preserve food. Again, you can keep it for months, for years. Anything you do with vinegar, using vinegar and sugar, you can keep for years, technically speaking. Just put it down in your cellar where there is an even temperature throughout the year, so it doesn't get very hot or very cold because of the summer and the winter. And keep it away from the light, because the light will simply it will change the color of the pickle or whatever it is that you're doing. So you want to keep it the same, so always have the lights off, only when you go and pick it up, obviously, so you don't stumble, darlings. So I'll see you in 20 minutes. Alright, darling, so it's been 20 minutes. I've taken them out, so now I'm just gonna let them cool off outside, room temperature. And that should be that. So there we are, darlings. This has been the apple chutney, which you can, of course, do the same recipe with pears, for example. If you have any questions or uncertainties, please put them down in the comment section for the whole class, so everybody can also see the question and accordingly the answer. I hope you found this interesting, instructive, perhaps even a little amusing, and I wish you a most excellent day. Goodbye. Ba 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 ba.